afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Cape Town, for having me. Thank you to everyone for asking me to be here. And yeah, who's sleepless? Everyone, yeah. So whoever coined this phrase, sleep like a baby, clearly has never had a baby. So babies don't sleep. So for those of you who are pregnant, don't hold your hopes out for very long. Okay, so let's talk about what do we know about sleep? Okay, I'm going to get back to that slide. We know that sleep is essential for your baby. It's essential for everybody. We know that babies' sleep patterns change with time. And we know that babies' sleep problems are common. But it's also important to know baby sleep problems are quite subjective. Because if you've got a newborn and you're expecting your baby to sleep for 8 hours at night, that is an unrealistic expectation. Whereas if you are thinking that your 3-year-old can only sleep for 3 hours at night, then that's also an unrealistic expectation. So just remember that. So what I'm going to teach you today is what is going to be a reasonable expectation to expect from your little one, and what isn't a reasonable expectation. So what does your baby think about sleep? And there's William James again, that great, big, blooming, buzzing confusion. Your poor little bubby has been inside your tummy for 9 months in this optimal environment, and suddenly he's thrust into this huge, big, great, blooming, buzzing confusion. So that's what he thinks about it. What do we think about it? So what we need to understand is what happens to our babies' brains when we get on with parenting them. So any stimulatory input that comes into baby's brain will arouse your child, obviously. Any calming input that's going to come in will calm your baby. So when we're thinking about sleep, I want you to remember this. Okay, so why is our baby's brain so important? So what happens to all of us is that as the big, buzzing, blooming world comes pouring in, we can choose as adults and as mature brains to say, are we going to act on this or are we going to just filter it out? Like we're not hearing all the babies fidgeting now because you're listening to me. But your baby will only be able to differentiate that when he's about 3 months old. So in the first 3 months of life, your babies are incredibly sensitive to any of that calming stimulation. So bear that in mind, even though we know that they are fantastic scientists. Right, so what about sleep rhythms? And just note, we're talking about sleep rhythms here, not sleep routines. So please don't put yourselves under pressure to get your baby into a routine from dot. Okay, it's the rhythms that your baby develops that will settle the routines. So remember that. They only start to develop at around 6 weeks of age. So that's why the first 6 weeks of your baby's life is an incredibly blurry, fuzzy time. Nothing's quite sort of sharp for you, and that's normal to feel like that. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong or that you're a bad parent. And we know that our regular sleep-wake cycles are only established at round about 3 months of age because that's when your baby's brain is mature enough to start the filtering process of this great, big, buzzing, blooming world. Okay, so this is now a baby's sleep cycle. So there's a lot of talk about your babies must link their cycles together. And obviously a baby who sleeps a long stretch of time is managing to link a sleep cycle. And a baby's sleep cycle is roughly 45 minutes. Us as adults, about an hour and a half, 90 minutes. So what happens is that the first 10 minutes is that drifty, drowsy, twitchety time of sleep. That's the first 10 minutes. Then you go into that deep, dead sleep where you can vacuum under the baby's cot and the baby doesn't wake up. But after 10 or 20 minutes, they start fidgeting and coming into that drifty, dreamy sleep again. Now, if the dog barks or a door slams at that moment in time, where your baby's coming out of the first sleep cycle at 45 minutes-ish, little newborn about 30 minutes, that is what's going to wake your baby up. However, if your baby wakes up after one sleep cycle and is happy and content, then you know they've had enough sleep. So bear that in mind as well. So, how do we put this all together? Okay, now I've been tasked in 20 minutes to talk about talks that I usually take 2 hours to do. So we're going to sort of whistle-stop through this. So, 17 years ago, the Sleep Foundation was formed. And what they do is they take all the evidence-based, all the latest research, they consult with sleep experts, and they compile guidelines around sleep because it's such a dynamic field. So I'm going to give you 8 of their simple guidelines to get healthy sleep. Remember, we want healthy sleep, not unhealthy sleep. So the first guideline is to identify when your baby is tired. And that would be to identify your baby's signals. And in Baby Sense, we've really written about those signals. How to know when your baby is sleeping and when your baby needs to sleep. And interestingly enough, a lot of the signs of colic are the signs that your baby is ready to go to sleep. Fussing, grimacing, squirming, needing to suck, going blue around the mouth, which, by the way, is a neurological symptom. It's got nothing to do with wind. So if you take anything home, take that home today. You need to look for those signs. And often they come and you miss them and you think they're colic. So you try and you intervene to make the colic go away. And all you're doing is you're pouring in stimulation. Remember, stimulation equals arousal. So we need to identify when our baby is asleep. So how do we do that? We watch their wake time to see how long your baby can cope in being that little scientist before he becomes this great, big, buzzing, blooming, confused mess. Okay, so what are those awake times? You'll also find them in Baby Sense and in Sleep Sense as well. Look at our newborn's time, 45 minutes. And that includes feeding and cleaning poop nappies and doing all of that. It's not long at all. And you can see as your baby gets older, those awake times increase. So that by the time they're going to preschool or play school, they can usually manage to stay awake the whole day, but need to go to bed fairly early. The third guideline is to establish your baby's healthy and secure sleep zone. And that may be wherever you wish. There is no pressure to do anything as long as Heather said earlier, you're getting quality sleep. But try and establish it as a happy, secure sleep zone so that your child, as he grows, will eventually start identifying and realizing, okay, that's where I sleep and this is where I'm safe. We need to put our babies into bed. So many moms and dads say to me, my baby never sleeps. And I often say, well, do you ever put them to bed? So think about that. So we know the best way for babies to sleep is on their backs, free of blankets, free of anything that could possibly smother them. But swaddling is a great way to get your little ones settled. Heather's shown you how to do that. And babies under the age of 3 months of age, you cannot self-soothe, do well with swaddling because they've got a very, very active startle reflex, which pulls them away from the midline, which is arousing to them. So we need to keep them contained and snuggled up. Okay. We need to start encouraging regular day and nighttime sleep. So that by the nighttime sleep, you would start with looking at bedtime routines. You would start at just watching the clock and just pushing and nurturing your baby into a bit more of a routine that comes from the rhythm. Remember, we have to have a rhythm before the routine starts. And something as simple as a consistent and enjoyable bedtime routine is what babies thrive on. So that a bath, a massage, quiet time in the older child, stories, quiet play, the rituals and the routine of going to bed. Really, really important. The 7th guideline is to encourage your baby to start falling asleep and to be able to self-soothe. Now remember, it's an unrealistic expectation to expect your baby to self-soothe under the age of about 12 weeks because we know they haven't got the neurological growth to actually self-calm. But you can really encourage that. The mouth and the midline will help your baby to self-calm. So that's why sucking on fingers, using a dummy, will help your baby to learn to switch off. And if you've got that time right, by watching the awake times, watching the signals, you'll hit that sweet spot. And the 8th and last guideline is to get the timing right. And I love this picture of this little thing. He is so ready to go to sleep. I presume it's a he. It looks like a blue hat. But girls can also wear blue. So it's just to find that time where your baby's calm and just getting into the drowsy phase. Because remember, you can't have a baby who's asleep if they haven't become sleepy, which is obviously drowsy and not overstimulated. So you have to go through those motions. So that's when you put your little one to sleep. And those nurture nest pillows and things like that are fantastic because you're recreating that womb-like environment, which is where your baby thrives best. So what happens when you don't get it right? This is what happens when you don't get it right. So if you look where we have a child who wakes up tired in the morning, and everyone, the whole household wakes up tired. If you're not in tune to those signals, if you're not in tune to watching the awake times, you then will have a fussy, overtired baby. Okay, what happens in the baby's brain when one becomes overtired? It's not only babies' brains, it's just that it happens much sooner with babies, is that there's a rush of adrenaline and cortisol. It's the fight or flight. So we have a wired-up baby, and that's the toddlers those toddlers that are still whizzing about at 10 o'clock at night. Think of you, if you're working late, if you're studying, and then you're exhausted, your body's physically exhausted, but you can't go to sleep. You're like Bambi on the New Jersey Turnpike. That's because of all those stress hormones in your brain. So what happens is that we then need a whole lot of calming input. So that's why you're having to do extensive rocking and holding and driving around the block and doing all those things. At least you don't have to drive to Bloemfontein. But your child cannot fall asleep unassisted. So you get caught up in all these patterns of doing all those mad things to try and get your baby to sleep. But what happens when the baby eventually falls asleep, they cannot link sleep cycles. So there's fragmented sleep. So they wake up every 45 minutes, or in the toddler, every hour on the hour, and you can't work it out. It's because they can't link sleep cycles because they've fallen asleep, overstimulated, and overtired. Am I talking sense? Right, okay, so let's unpack it into age groups. And you can just apply everything. So I'm just going to quickly whiz through these age groups. So in our newborns, what's the wisdom with sense in our newborn phase? Obviously, we need, it goes without saying, a healthy, non-medical issue child, okay? A non-sick, non-diseased child. Very important in the early days, and for those of you who are pregnant or you've got tiny babies, just bear this in mind. Separate calories from comfort. If you're sure your baby's well-fed, don't keep on feeding for comfort because it's not maybe the right thing to do, because all you're doing is you're pouring stimulation into your baby's brain. So separate calories from comfort. And you can assist to sleep, and you can hold and rock and do whatever you like to get your baby to sleep in those newborn phases, because your baby needs to be on you and held and kept in that womb-like environment. But remember, by 6 weeks, those rhythms start coming and the routines start forming. So from 6 weeks, we can start just sort of choving them along a little bit, okay? By 6 weeks, you've really got to know your baby really well. Even though you think you don't, you do. I promise you, don't distrust your instinct. And so you can assist whatever it takes to get your baby calm enough to be in that sort of milk-drunk state of that gorgeous slide earlier. So whatever it takes to get your baby into that state, as long as you've separated the calories from the comfort, and you're going to put your little one into his bed, wherever that may be, and you're going to keep the heavy pressure on him with your hand. He's going to squirm and wriggle, so you work through the wriggles and the niggles. If he's completely lost the plot, and I love this word, and think about it, you can all identify, discombobulated. And that's what babies become when they're in this crying frenzy. So you've got to help them get calm again, back into bed, and you just keep trying. And in that way, your baby will learn to self-calm with your assistance. Between 4 and 12 months of age, hunger can become a real issue. So if your baby, if it's a nutrition issue only, you need to perhaps start looking at the introduction of food, solid food, and what we can expect, what's a reasonable expectation from 4 months of age, where we know our babies are well fed and well nourished and they're not sick. We can expect a 6 to 8 hour stretch at night without your child needing any intervention. Okay, it's attainable, it's there, you can do it. From 6 months of age, we can expect them to start sleeping through. It's not an unreasonable expectation, and it doesn't have to be hell. So please seek help. And we've got a regular day and night schedules going. That's what happens in the day, this is what happens at night. Toddlers, of course, come with their own bag of tricks completely. We need bedtime boundaries, really important. You need routine. If there's any stage of your parenting journey when your children need routine, it's when they're toddlers. Okay, you give them an inch, they'll chew up your whole body in 1 second flat. They need a balanced diet of enough calming activities and enough stimulatory activities, because they are little scientists after all. Okay, they need a secure sleep zone. They need to know that's where we sleep. That's not where we play, and that's not where we have hijinks. That's where we sleep. A nightlight is very useful if you have bad sleepers, because they need to be able to identify their secure sleep zone should they wake in the night and be able to self-calm and self-soothe. And what's missing at the bottom of the slide under the co-leaf logo is an attachment object. So a doo-doo blankie, a dummy, whatever you find your baby, and you tell your toddler, this is your nighttime friend. I'm not your friend at night. I'm old. I need to sleep. So tap into their sense of humor. Okay, but sometimes you might need to change unhealthy sleep habits. And as Mark Twain says, you can't break a bad habit by throwing it out the window. You've got to walk it slowly down the stairs. So if your unhealthy sleep habit is already 8, 9, or 9 months old or 3 years old, you're not going to cure it in one night. And you're not going to hear about magnesium bath salts or some wonder product. And one swallow does not a summer make. Okay, you have to invest that time and effort. So you might need to do some sleep training. And sleep training is not to be feared. It's to be acknowledged and it's to be embraced. Because remember, we want to have a healthy, happy child who's sleeping enough in order to learn and to be this fantastic little scientist that we know that they can be. Just because I'm in child health care and I never let an opportunity to go by because I'm an advocate for my children's health, is please don't forget about vaccination. Okay, it's really important. Not all vaccines are state scheduled. There's a lot of private vaccines that are out there, so please talk to your clinic sister and get guidance from her. There's no link to autism. The science is definitely telling us that's not what it is. You need to keep up to date. One forgets about going to the clinic when your children are older, and adult boosters are really necessary. Oh, what have I done? Okay, so for those of you who are sitting here, who are sleepless, I really hope that it's not going to be too much longer that you sleep like a baby. So we need to start sleeping like adults. And I wish you all a fantastic night's sleep tonight, and thank you for having me.